I think you got to take small bites at first and basically ask for the grace to experiment and prove to them over time that this is going to work. I wish we could simulate to the penny shutting off our social media for the year and seeing what that will do for the business. Sometimes just recognizing what has the potential to be good content, I think is a major piece of the puzzle.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Radical Content. Boy, I am excited today. No pressure to my guest, but I've been wanting to ask this guy a question for a long time. He might be the longest person we've been trying to get a hold of. But Tyler, dude, pumped to have you on the show. Thanks for coming on Radical Content today.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad I could finally make it happen.
Yeah, I totally get it. Like I know many people that want to come on, and sometimes just the way things work, it's a little bit difficult. And so I'm glad that things have opened up. There's a lot we're going to talk about Empire State Building. We're going to talk about the political world of social because you've got a new role that's really exciting. But I want to start with something that I think it sounds like you got a hot take about. And I'm going to go to LinkedIn and I'm going to go back a month ago and I'm going to read the complete and total lack of self-awareness backpack wearers have on the subway is outstanding. Let's start there. What's happening on the subway, Tyler?
There's two pieces of that opinion. So first and foremost, when I go to work and I'm in the office 80% of the time, Friday, like today is, I'm able to work remotely. When I go to the office, I am without a bag. I have my wallet, I have my keys, I have my headphones, and I have my badge, and I've got my phone. And like, I don't know what other people are carrying with them to work. I'm assuming a lot of times it's gym stuff, maybe a lunch. That's all well and good. I've never really liked having a ton of stuff on me. I think it limits you and whatever. So I think people might be bringing too much to work. Secondarily, people should carry bags. I have nothing against carrying a bag, but the backpack specifically in New York City, when we are often in tight places, is the least economical, ergonomical, all of it. So when people are on the train, they have no awareness of just how much space that they're taking up. So when they're turning, when they're entering, getting off, they're just completely whacking people. It's the same thing on airplanes. People have no spatial awareness of their bags. And so my war is on backpacks as a whole. I think as adults, you carry a brief, you carry a tote, whatever that may be. And then secondarily, it's like if you are wearing something or carrying a bag, just, to each their own. But
if you're listening to this via audio, I'm holding up my backpack. I have struck a person before, like in the subway. And I say struck because I did feel that way. Now, I was traveling there. I don't live there. And I did have a lot of things as I was kind of jaunting around the island there in Manhattan. But yeah, I get it. It's a fun place to. But now I'm interested in like your hot takes on people bringing their dogs in IKEA bags. But is that maybe that's another episode on the subway? Have you seen this?
I have feelings, but I've learned to not upset dog owners.
Oh, okay. That's where you draw the line. Got it.
Ever. Yeah.
Like business people going to work. I'm coming after you if you're wearing the wrong thing. Well, I appreciate you. And I do have one other fun thing before we talk social and marketing. Are we a Knicks fan?
I'm from Boston, Massachusetts.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Or sorry, I'm from Worcester, Massachusetts. So I grew up, Boston sports fan. And I am still a Celtics fan. That being said, whether I was at the Empire State Building or whether I'm working for the city of New York now, what's good for the city is good for the city, and so I'm enjoying this Knicks.
Well, it's good. Well, I'm a Dallas Mavericks fan, and so I am a Brunson fan, Jalen Brunson fan. So it's good to see. By the time this airs, we'll know what happened. I mean, they're up 3-1, so it feels like we know what happened, but what's going to happen? But that Spurs team they're scrappy and young. But
yeah, it has been really enjoyable and exciting to be a part of. I think, since I moved here in 2017, I think this is the deepest a team has gone in the playoffs since then. So watching that, and the city there's a palpable buzz. And yeah, it's been great.
All right. So here's the question, Tyler, I've been wanting to ask you for maybe years. How do you get a building? A freaking building. Now, a famous building, the Empire State Building, maybe one of the most famous buildings, but how do you get a building to have millions of followers? I mean, I know you're not there anymore, but you haven't been gone too long. They've got over 1 million followers on Instagram. They got 2.3 million followers on TikTok. How did this start? How did this happen? We're going to spend a lot of time kind of in this area, but I just want to start very broadly, and then we'll kind of poke around a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So I had been at Barstool Sports for 4 years before the Empire State Building came calling, and I liked my time a lot at Barstool. A lot of my closest friends are still folks who I worked with there. I was involved with Barstool when I was at college at UMass, and then was lucky enough to be offered a position after I graduated. And I was not in any position. I needed a job when I graduated. I was not in any position to kind of dilly-dally afterwards. And New York City had never really been on my radar. I thought I was going to wind up in Washington, D.C. I had always wanted to work in politics, or Boston seemed, logical, being from Massachusetts. So I get a message from LinkedIn, sorry, not from LinkedIn, but on LinkedIn one day. And it's from a blind recruiter saying that a New York City real estate company is looking for a social media manager. And I was looking to leave my time at Barstool, but I'm like, real estate, it's not really somewhere that had been a passion of mine. But I said, sure, I'll take the intro call. We'll see what comes of it. And the first line that this recruiter says is, the Empire State Building's looking for a social media manager. And I responded with, you should lead with that in your recruiting messages.
You're already giving them communication tips.
Yeah.
They already have the right guy.
You should lead with that in your communications when you're trying to recruit, because if it was just any other real estate group, and at the Empire State Building is owned by the Empire State Realty Trust, and they're a REIT that owns a bunch of different properties throughout the city. And if it had just been another real estate group who was like, I probably wouldn't leave Barstool Sports to do that. But the opportunity to go and work for, like you said, the most famous building in the world, and obviously such an influential part of New York City's history, I thought was just like, what a cool opportunity. And so I knew as well that the person who hired me, her name's Abby Rickard. She's the chief marketing officer there, and she's still there, and she's wonderful. And the rest of the team there are all really talented professionals. I knew that she hiring me, coming from Barstool, understood what the Empire State Building social pages could be. And before that, there was an agency that had been running the social pages essentially for the better part of the last decade. And their tone on social, I think, probably was great for the Empire State Building in the mid 2010s. But in the aftermath of COVID, as Gen Z is kind of bubbling up as this major force online, what their tone was, which I would equate to kind of how Disney acts on social media. It's a family friendly, and it works great for Disney. That's their bread and butter. That's who they're trying to attract. But in the world of, observation decks and tourism, especially in New York City, you're going against a lot of new, innovative, different products. And the Empire State Building, for all of its benefits, is 95 years old. And you have to work around the confines of what a 95-year-old institution and building, the challenges that presents. I kind of took my time, learned the ins and outs, and then landed on what the new tone of that social media page is going to be. And where I landed was it should speak and act like a New Yorker. And the New Yorker I always had in mind, which I've said before, was Patti LuPone. If you're familiar, she's a legendary Broadway star. And she's a New Yorker through and through. She's tough. She doesn't take shit from anybody. And that's what I thought the Empire State Building should represent. It should be proud. It should have a lot of self-worth.
So the Empire State Building is a lady.
The Empire State Building is canonically, it is a she. It is referred to as a she. So that's where we landed. And that presented itself really heavily in the way our communication on Twitter change. Obviously people like Wendy's and Duolingo kind of set the standard for the personification of a brand.
Sure.
But we weren't flaming people in the style of Wendy's, and we weren't as culturally on as a Duolingo would be. We still kind of had to obviously stay true to the identity of the Empire State Building as an institution. But on TikTok is really where it presented itself in the most dramatic way. We hired a group
let me pause real quick, because I want to get to TikTok, but I want to pause and say, what was the reaction to, because you got brought in, you're coming from Barstool Sports, and so let me just stop there for a second and say, what was it? Because I love sports people. I went to school for sports radio, and I started my career in sports radio and worked at EA Sports. And what was it about Barstool that you took with you into this kind of new world? Because there's a lot of things to learn from sports. Was there anything specifically that you took with you into that next chapter?
Yeah, I think, specifically Barstool, especially at that time, I was employee number 56, I think. It was a very much an always on type of mindset. And I do think if you're trying to make big sweeping changes for a brand on social media or just in media in general, you kind of have to always be on. And obviously that's not sustainable forever, but in that kind of startup mode, which we certainly were in Barstool at that time, you kind of always had to be on. So I felt that was important to bring to the Empire State Building, like always looking for the most inane way that you could tie some cultural zeitgeist back to the Empire State Building. I thought was really important. Recognizing that doing what everyone else is doing is the worst thing that you could do. I think Barstool made its bread and butter on the fact that they were so different from everyone else in the sports space at that time. I mean, obviously there have been some copycats since, but for the better part of a decade, they owned that lane of irreverence and speaking like their audience spoke. I wanted to bring that same type of mindset to the travel and tourism space, because even still, it's not a place where a lot of people are experimenting.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, it's funny. I jumped from sports to travel and tourism as well in a different way, right? But I think one of the things that I learned early on. So if I go back in time, I was in Dallas, and the radio station I wanted to work at was Sports Radio 1310. The Ticket. Their program director went and started the Mike and Mike show, the original Mike and Mike show at ESPN, and he ended up coming back to the Ticket at one point. But the thing that the Ticket did that was different than anyone else that today is commonplace, and I think it things like the Ticket actually kind of birthed things like Barstool Sports and new media later on. But the Ticket was doing original comedy, sketches, fake interviews, and then they do some X's and O's, but it wasn't all X's and O's. But it also wasn't like shock jock guy talk. It was it was like your sports and entertainment for a normal dad that likes comedy, likes pop culture. And the thing I loved about the Ticket, and I think about this a lot in my communications and my strategy when I'm working with brands or the brands I've been at, they did something because they found their unique lane and a lane that was ownable. And a lane that was just so different. And actually, it's what people wanted. People wanted to hear you do a fake comedic interview with a celebrity versus just two guys yelling at each other about should they have screened or not screened, or should they have ran the ball or passed the ball.
Yeah.
That's still always going to be popular. And so I love that's, my story connects a little bit to what Barstool did. They completely interrupted, sports media, because they were willing to do that. And in some ways, I feel like, now I'm just on like a rant here myself, but like in some ways, I feel like a lot of people went guy talk and it just became like girls and like, it was like the Maxim kind of world with sports. But that wasn't Barstool. I'm not saying they didn't leverage any of that kind of content, but it felt like they really had a different point of view. And so I love to hear how kind of that shaped a little bit of your beginning and probably some stuff that you brought into the realty side of things.
Yeah, I think Barstool was always ahead of the curve, especially in terms of viewer retention. I think now everyone's talking about viewer retention, but even, back in, again, it feels so recent, but in terms of the way the digital landscape has shifted, like in 2019 and 2020, like that's what, in my role at that point in time, that's what I was focused on.
Right.
For presenting our original programming, whether it was via the copywriting or whether it was the actual clip itself, in terms of just getting people to stay around and watch. So
when you left Barstool, you come into this new role and you're presenting kind of she went and hired someone from Barstool. She probably knew what she was getting, but what was the reaction to like, here's how I want to take this into the future? Like, what did you present? Kind of walk me through that moment.
Yeah. And so, yes, I knew whoever hired me when I left Barstool, was going to understand what was going to happen. And my departure from Barstool was not without some fanfare. My boss, Paul Gazinski, he's still the head of social, and he's been Dave's, right-hand person for almost 20 years. I told him, which was a hard conversation because I love Paul and I appreciated everything he always did for me. But he's like, I can tell Dave that you're leaving and I can't control how he reacts to that. Or you can go on Dave's podcast. I think he was doing the Dave Portnoy show still at that time. And you can tell him. And I'm like, I know that neither of the outcomes of either of these scenarios are going to be ideal. But I think me going on and doing it, he'll at least respect. And so I went on to Dave's podcast, told him I was leaving, and
Did he know before you went on?
No.
He found out live on the or live, recorded live. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he went on a multi-day public tirade against the Empire State Building.
But
an iconic building. What, like, that's like saying you want to go work for a Times Square billboard.
Which was funny, but also made me worried. I'm like, am I gonna, get this offer revoked and whatnot? But I had multiple conversations with the Empire State Building afterwards. They understood it. And I thought that in and of itself was like a green light too. They know what they're getting into. They know what they're trying to get from me. I just wanted to make sure that wasn't going to be my high watermark moving forward. Like, as that was going to be the peak of whatever success I had at the Empire State Building. So once I got there, you try not to blow everything up immediately. You want to learn from
even though you want to.
Yeah, even though you absolutely want to. And we were dealing with, we had an agency still at the time. So I was working with these folks who had been on this account for 10 years. And obviously some of them had outlasted previous social media managers. So they're not going to, have me come in and be like, this guy knows exactly what he's talking about. He's going to run the show. So there's those institutional things. And then obviously, you want to make sure that you're relaying to the president of the observatory and other executive leadership kind of what your mindset is. And basically, I said this at a conference I spoke at last year. I think a lot of social professionals want to show up to the new company and blow things up right away. And I think you got to take small bites at first and basically ask for the grace to experiment and prove to them over time that this is going to work. And then once you can point to some empirical data that says, this is doing much better than what we were doing before, they'll give you the leeway to go even further on what you have in mind.
Yeah. What's funny about that is that one of the things I've enjoyed about social media, really growing up in it since 2007 and on, is I felt like this was like a secret advantage for social pros, and we're probably on the other end of that in some places, but every place I went to sucked. And it was like, you didn't have to do a lot to change the game. It was like, man, I just got to make this slightly more interesting. And so I found that to be extremely valuable. And so I remember, kind of those kinds of moments that you were dealing with. And I thought those were positive ways to kind of be in a career field that was, the wave was just kind of taking off. And so if you knew a little bit, you could be really, really dangerous. And I honestly, I contribute a lot of my career success just from kind of having that mindset and a little bit of being in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, I would love to be like 8 years older and to have had being a social media manager at a certain time, just be like overseeing one Facebook page. Like that must have been such a ride.
Yeah, definitely. So as you were kind of getting into it, you're testing out, you're getting grace, you're developing a strategy. Was there a point of view where you were like, okay, we're done testing. This is it. This is our strategy. What was that like? How did that go internally?
Yeah, I'm trying to think what my first like big moment was. I do remember when we had like our first, big hit. So 2 years ago, and so I guess I can jump to TikTok in that sense.
Yep.
Our Twitter success came from the fact that the Empire State Building in and of itself has a lot of brand equity. Like when someone sees the Empire State Building, they don't have to be like, what is that? So we are blessed by the fact that when the Empire State Building commented on something in the cultural realm, people immediately, we're going to have some reaction to it. And just the Empire State Building in and of itself commenting on anything is also just kind of funny as is. So, but on TikTok, I guess this would have been 2021. There was this scandal on there about this thing called Couch Guy, where it was this guy at school and his girlfriend, I think, had been abroad, and she came back and the guy was like sitting on a couch with another girl. And basically it seemed like he'd been caught in the act of maybe canoodling with someone he shouldn't have been. And so we reacted to that video and for the first time used the face filter for the Empire State Building. And it was literally the video cut. And then it's just the building kind of looking aghast at what they had seen. And that took off really well. And so that gave us some runway on like, oh, we might have something here. Because it's hard, especially at that point in time, because there were still a lot of COVID restrictions going on. It's hard to personify a building on a place like TikTok where it's video first, obviously, and you need something or someone who can be a video. So the face filter was our first in there. So we could keep doing kind of culturally relevant things. But the second part, and I had this conversation with the chief marketing officer, I said, we need on-screen creators to be the face of the Empire State Building for when we're having celebrities here, et cetera, to do things with them. So we went out and hired an intern. He was a freshman at Columbia, and that was 5 years ago. He's still at the Empire State Building. He was with us for 4 years, graduated. He's still there. He's an incredible videographer. And he's one of 5 now, I think, that we've hired throughout the time. And basically the shtick is all the guards at the Empire State Building and the hosts are in like these great kind of Art Deco, slate gray and blue suits. And that they're the most identified people at the building. If you go to the building, you will see 20 to 30 of them. So we put these interns in these suits to make video content around the building and bring the building to life on TikTok. And that really opened a ton of doors. And I wish in 2020, before I was there, they've been kind of doing the same thing, because I would imagine that the Empire State Building would have 4 million, if not more, followers on TikTok if they had really been active in that kind of like hyper growth era of 2020.
I like to tell people all the time, anybody can be good on social. It doesn't mean it's easy, but anybody can be good on social. There's a freaking pancake, restaurant that's getting, hundreds of millions of views. Yeah. I probably have been a little belittling Tyler over the years and saying there's a building that's got, millions of followers. Why is that? Like, what is the secret sauce that because there's a lot of people out there that are like, we can't be popular because we're just a building. We can't be popular. We're just a store. We can't be popular. This doesn't work for us. And so there's a lot of either boring brands, and honestly, they're not all boring. They just, people are, I don't know if people are lazy or just not creative. But what do you think? If you plopped a Tyler, I think, into all of these places, people that Tyler has kind of, that kind of built up, I believe that some of these places find success. And so what is that secret sauce that you guys were able to find at the Empire State Building that everybody else just has to, it's the game you got to play?
Yeah. I spoke about this it was the main thrust of what I spoke about at the conference in Perth last year. And it's about reinventing legacy brands. And I think, the Empire State Building, 95 years old, legacy brand. I think of other legacy brands like Chanel or like Coca-Cola or, anyone who's been around for longer than 50 years or just, is so blue chip. And I think so many of those brands refuse to adapt to the realities of social media now because they are so protective of that brand, which I can appreciate. But having a protected brand, if you're not actually bringing the brand to anybody, therefore the brand is essentially useless. And I think the 3 things that guide the way I think about social media, it's actually funny. My old chief marketing officer just texted me.
She's like, what is this? Do you like this tweet?
Yeah. The 3 things that guide what I try to do on social media, and it's been the same with the Empire State Building. It's the same with the borough president. And it's less or so about, the low lift things like sharing information. But when it comes to actually going out, making video, producing content, the 3 things I think are, is this going to educate somebody? Is this going to entertain someone? Or is it going to inform somebody about something? And education and informing may sound the same, but I think they're 2 very different lanes. And if it strikes 2 of those things, you're golden. If it strikes 1 and you package it really, really well, it can still do okay. And if it doesn't hit any of those, then it's not worth putting out into the ether. And that's kind of always what I try to adhere to. Obviously, you don't stifle innovation or experimentation at the expense of those three check boxes. But those 3 things have always kind of been my guiding light.
So I love that. I want to ask a question kind of and challenge you a little bit, because I think you're right. I think what I've seen over the years, and I know you've seen this too, is other people get those same tools in their hand. Educate, entertain, inform. They say things like, be interesting, be compelling, don't be boring. But they still go make boring shit, and they still put it out into the world. So my question is, like, this is a bad analogy I'm trying to come up with at the right time, but like, you put a paintbrush in my hand, and you tell me how to paint, and it comes out looking really horrible. You put a paintbrush in an artist's hand that spent hundreds of hours and maybe thousands of hours painting, it comes out looking like a masterpiece. And I feel like the things you're talking about are paintbrushes, but still the person behind the paintbrush matters so much. So how do you help these people that like philosophically and strategically or know this stuff? They say it, they listen to podcasts, they go to conferences, they're like, hell yeah. And then you go see their content calendar and it's all boring. And it's not just because of legal, it's not just because of their brand guidelines, it's because they're not good.
Yeah, for me, I think a lot of that is removing ego. I think you have to like remove your ego from whatever you're making, and which is hard, obviously, in anything in life to try to remove ego and feeling. But for me, it's, would I send this to somebody? And if the answer is no, and you have to think, you can't just think about, would I send this to my best friend? Because that bar is like so low. But you have to think, is there anyone in my universe that I would send this to? And if that answer is no, then it should not go out the door. I think a great example from 2 days ago, and it seems so simple, but I think you have to recognize the shareability. 2 days ago in New York City, they renamed a street in the Village for Jimi Hendrix next to where his music studio used to be. And literally it's maybe a 15-second clip of that street unveiling. But the combination of, there's that anticipation of the street sign coming off, what's under the street sign, and then obviously the legacy of Jimi Hendrix. I think those two things put together, the retention and then the just wide interest, lent itself to be a good social opportunity. And it's got, I think, 700,000 views on our Instagram, which our Instagram only has 10,000 followers. So
that's awesome.
It's just it sounds kind of glib, but that you have to, as a professional, and obviously it's something that is learned. I don't think for necessarily everybody that you can just identify it off the bat, but with experience, you can look at something and say, all right, this is a hit waiting to happen. And you either kind of, after a certain amount of time, you either have it or you don't. That doesn't mean you're not a good social professional. There's a million other things that is needed within the realm, but sometimes just recognizing what has the potential to be good content, I think is a major piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, I think there's this continuum of people that get it and people that don't get it. And I think the people that get it are probably a little bit more creative strategist type social professionals. I think the people that don't get it, it doesn't mean that you can't be a social professional. It probably means you're more of a social media manager, which is nothing wrong with that, right? It's content planning. It's making sure things are done right. It's testing, making sure the targeting's done well. It's, everybody's got a different role to play, but totally. I do think the people that get it are the game changer hires. And I believe they will change the game for a brand or for a channel overnight. But this is not about me. This is about you. So I'm going to move on to another question for you. What were some of the things that you were like, because you did this for a minute, right? At Empire. And you were like, guys, I know this is going to work. Like we've got some, for me at Universal, it was like anything with Potter, any new attraction, any big IP, anytime we could talk to our annual pass holders in a way that shows we get them, or Halloween Horror Nights. Like we had some stuff that were like our go-tos. Yeah. What were your go-tos at Empire State Building?
Well, it was crazy enough that it happened once, but it's even crazier that it happened twice. But while I was at the Empire State Building, we had 2 earthquakes in New York City, which are exceptionally rare, at least, and earthquakes you could really feel. Like, there might be small tremors. And with the first one, I was sitting in a side room, much like I would be now. I think I was on a Zoom or whatever. And I felt it underneath my feet, and I just tweeted immediately, "I am fine," in all caps from the Empire State Building.
You did. So you didn't text your CMO. You didn't go to legal.
No. No, and I think that was 2023. So I had earned a level of trust.
I get that.
And we had, it was kind of crazy. We had done some type of promotion before that. I forget which one off the top of my head, but that one had 40, or like basically long and short of it was this big experiential event that we did in the Empire State Building, which was an unquestionable success. I can't remember which one it was. That which cost a lot of money, a lot of, man hours, etc. My one tweet about this earthquake that took 3 seconds and cost the company no money had the exact same amount of reach and impact.
Did you have a slide somewhere that had that tweet with like a media value that you showed?
Yeah.
Oh, dude, I've done that before.
And then so that happened, and it was on a lot of different national news networks. Colbert did a segment on it that night, and so it was moments like that. Like, it was the quick hitting cultural moments where the Empire State Building had such an immediate point of view. Like the Empire State Building reacting to an earthquake in New York City, thankfully one that there was no damage, no fatalities or whatever. Like moments like that, you can't bottle. I think another one that we had that was really great. The Rangers were playing the Carolina Hurricanes in a playoff series, and I think the Hurricanes were maybe up 2-1 or maybe even 3-1 in the series, and posted a graphic of a hurricane above the Empire State Building. So came across that, kept it in the back pocket, and then as the Rangers continued their comeback throughout the week, we just kept taking pot shot after pot shot after pot shot at the Hurricanes. So yeah, it was the moments like that. And then honestly, the other times when I felt that we were really, at our peak were, and I give the credit to the content creator team. Like, I know, and it's still the case, like I am not an on-camera TikTok content creator. That is not my strong suit. It's not, I didn't want to be the social media manager who was on camera, because I think for a company that's a bad investment, they leave, and then you kind of you're looking for a new face again, and you hope they can be good on camera, but also good at the job, which is often the times not the case. So we've been so blessed by really just finding these incredible on-screen creators. They've all started as college students. They've all eventually basically become full-time employees, and their ability to take either what's happening out in the culture or with the celebrities that we have at the building and come up with content. And this was kind of always the central thrust. What can we do here with them that they cannot do anywhere else in the world? And thinking about it in that lens. And I think finding the exclusivity that your brand has for the Empire State Building, it was obviously the observation deck and the height in the building itself. But every brand, like you said, whether it's a doctor's office or the Empire State Building, every single profession, brand, channel, everyone has that like glimpse of exclusivity that they can only do. And I think that's really important for people to kind of build their social world around, if you will.
So with all of this success, were you able to tie visitation to social, or did you guys go through any exercises to understand the network halo impact, and how did you and how did, whether it was directly attributed or more adjacent, how did you kind of prove that out internally?
Yeah, so that I started there at a weird time in tourism. It was in the aftermath of COVID, so obviously the city was still coming back from that massive dip in tourism visitation. During that time between 2019 and 2021, 2 more observation decks had also opened up in New York City. So, for the longest time, it was the Empire State Building. It was, whatever iteration of the World Trade Center and Top of the Rock. And then the Edge and the Summit opened. So you're looking at a market segmentation during that time period. And the Empire State Building also reworked their business model in the aftermath of COVID. Beforehand, there was no time ticketing. Everyone just kind of showed up when they wanted, and it was for guests, not an enjoyable experience. So the Empire State Building by design will never have as many visitors as they did pre-COVID, because sure, it's great to get as many people as you can through the door, but at the risk of people coming and being miserable, like that's not a win for anybody. And as I left, we had finally cracked the code with doing direct conversions. With different ticketing platforms, it's obviously hard, and we had finally migrated to a ticketing platform that allowed for direct conversions. So as I was leaving, we were starting to see the fruit of social in our sales, which was really exciting. That being said, before that, the way I went about doing it was taking, our impressions first and foremost and our reach, and then equating the individual impressions by platform, and then going off of whatever their present CPM was for that month, and then giving that a dollar value. So if we had 18 million impressions on Facebook in a month, I would say, all right, if we had to pay for those impressions, how much money would that cost? And it was usually in the hundreds of millions, if not millions of dollars across all of our social channels. So month after month, we were doing millions of dollars of not free work, because we were obviously getting paid, but our payroll was was nowhere near.
But if your payroll was their media dollars, that's a really good investment for the company.
It would be great. It'd be great. The other way was web traffic, as opposed to paid web traffic, which is obviously an important part of the funnel. How much web traffic were we able to organically drive, and what otherwise would we have to pay for that? That being said, though, I think organic social, which is what I oversaw, there was a completely different team that handled the paid campaigns on social media. At the end of the day, organic social is supposed to be about the top of the funnel and just bringing people into the party. So as much as I was personally excited anytime that we could, convert someone organically, it also was not my driving force. I wanted someone, whether they were going to come to the Empire State Building tomorrow or in 5 years, to just be in our orbit and come to our building because they're in the orbit itself.
How often do you feel like that social professionals are required to solve the entire funnel, and it leaves them and it leaves their strategy, I don't want to say impossible, but hard to be excellent, maybe?
Yeah, it is hard. There are good ways to do it and there are bad ways to do it. But at the end of the day, if the main goal of your social is to convert, it's never going to be good. And I wish there was a simulation where I could, when I was at the Empire State Building, I always said, I wish we could simulate to the penny shutting off our social media for the year and seeing what that would do for the business. Obviously impossible. But I would have loved to have just really found out.
There's some social professionals who would not want that to happen because they weren't as good. Right. But you guys are very good. All right, let's one more question here that's kind of in the weeds. Take me into the creative process. At some point you had some content creators, you built out that team a little bit. What does it look like in the week, for the week? How do you ideate? How do you stay on top of news? How do you decide what to jump on and what not to, and kind of steps and meetings? Give me a little bit of the high level summary for that.
Yeah, so I mean, we were again in the office most of the time while we were there. We're a real estate company, obviously want people in the office, and so every week we would have a TikTok stand-up meeting, and we would lay out the next few weeks, and really in there talk through about how we could leverage the different either events that were happening at the building or the different social media. The different celebrities that were coming through the door. So that would kind of be our table stakes. And really, I didn't want to put the kibosh on any idea that my content team had from the jump. I was always willing to let them flesh it out, present it, figure out if it was really feasible to do. Obviously, with all of those visits, you're dealing with the talent teams themselves. So you also have to be mindful of, sure, it'd be great to get blank to do something absolutely insane, but their team, more often than not, it was always the team and not the celebrity who was kind of the more protective, which I can absolutely understand.
Yeah. What was the flushing it out mean? Like, are they actually like going and baking out the concept and putting it into a couple slides and walking that through you or someone else, or is it more simple than that?
No, the thing that I relish and I will always try to maintain in my professional career is I never once asked my team to make slides for any presentation ever. Like, I think the slide culture in terms of social idea sharing is completely out of control. Some of the partners,
I feel judged, but keep going. I'm here for it.
Some of the partners that we worked with would, it wasn't that the product wasn't good. Obviously they're beautiful, but I'm like, the amount of labor that your team had to spend on putting together these meticulous slides and maybe it's just the way I work. Like, if you just walk me through the idea, I'm generally going to be with you or against you. The pretty slides are not really moving the needle for me. So no, a lot of times it was, they would put ideas in a briefing document basically and walk me through them. And then we would talk through those. I'd have edits. They would explain their feelings on certain things if I maybe felt the other way. And then we would come to a conclusion where, all right, these are the 3 to 5 ideas that we're going to present to this talent team. We'd present them to the talent team. The team would come back to us with edits or hopefully approvals. And then once that was done, once they arrived at the building, the content team, their efficiency was incredible. We usually at the end of the visit will get 5 to 10 minutes with whomever the guest was, and they worked fast and efficiently and professionally. Yeah. And I hope when people left that they had a good experience working with our team. Yeah.
What you did there, man, was awesome. And they continue to do great stuff. But I want to switch a little bit and talk about the new world that you're in. You're the director of communications for the office of Brad Hoylman and Siegel. Before we get into that, like, why? Like, that's a interesting jump, at least from a social professional standpoint. You had built this kingdom that was like awesome, revered. You were on all the stages. Everybody was talking to you about it. And I have a feeling we've got a little bit of a purpose answer coming, but I want to understand a little bit of the jump for you.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it starts in 2007. If we're being honest, my dad ran for office in 2007, and knock on wood, he's been a state representative in Massachusetts since. And that combined with President Obama running for the first time, I was 12, really unlocked a passion for politics
Awesome.
at that age. And through the Obama administration, and then through my dad being in office, that kind of never left. And it was my goal upon goals when I graduated from college in 2017 to move to DC and hopefully work in politics. But with the way the election went in 2016, there weren't a lot of jobs in DC for Democrats at the time. So that's kind of how, that in and of itself, that's how Barstool happened. And I'm thankful for that. But, and this kind of sounds wishy-washy, but I mean it sincerely, like my work at Barstool and my work at the Empire State Building, I always viewed through the lens of, because obviously politics is about connections a lot of the times. And, if you don't have connections in whatever office is hiring, it's tough to get noticed. And it was my goal upon goals, whether at Barstool or the Empire State Building, to build up a portfolio and a professional reputation that would somehow lend itself to someone in Democratic politics being willing to say, okay, we think this guy has some talent. We should, bring him on to help with us. Because, as much as I really loved my time at the Empire State Building and at Barstool Sports, tourism / real estate / sports media wasn't where my true, passions lied.
Yeah.
And I was connected through my father 2 years ago to the borough president. They both had similar bills. The borough president was a state senator before he was borough president. My dad was in the state legislature in Massachusetts, and they had similar bills in different states, and they got connected. And then after the borough president won last year, I said, hey, as you're building out your team for this administration, I would love to have conversations about, what I think could be possible for your communications at the borough president's office. And lucky enough, after a few interviews, he was kind enough to hire me. And now we're 5.5 months in, which is crazy. But it's been great, and I'm really happy to be there.
Well, I love this, and it's a different world, and I've got some questions kind of on this. It's funny. Obama was considered, and their head of communications, you probably know his name, I do not remember, but considered to do really innovative things with new media. I remember when he was on Between Two Ferns, and that was such a legendary moment in new media communications. And then Trump, like him or hate him, did a lot of interesting things in using social, maybe some things not so good, or a lot of things not so good, but definitely found new and innovative ways to use social and new media to move his agenda, get people to be interested in him. And now the one that we're hearing about, right, is the election of Mayor Mamdani, and everything that they did. So I guess my question for you, speaking in the industry rather than your specific area, we'll talk a little about your specific area here in a second. What are you seeing from this world that's so kind of exciting? It is exciting to see how important the role of new media, content, and social communications is in the political sphere.
Yeah, I think it has lent itself to politicians, whether they like it or not, really having to be as accessible as they've ever been. In this day and age, if you're not showing up where people are getting their information, and last year Nielsen, for the first time ever, said that most people are getting their news from social media, and it's no longer TV. So if you aren't showing up in these spaces and you're serving the public, then you're missing who you're talking to. And Mayor Mamdani's run last year, was fueled by a multitude of different factors here in the city. But far and away, I think what jumped out first for him was the fact that he was doing things on social media that none of his other major opponents were coming close to doing. And therefore, igniting interest in municipal elections that groups generally were not that keyed into. Those in their early 20s and their early 30s are typically not these massive voting blocks in municipal elections here in the city. And it's, again, you want to talk about owning the agenda. You're right. Like or dislike Trump, he completely controlled the narrative for the 2024 election.
Right.
And I think some of that, and I mentioned this when we were chatting a few weeks ago, the willingness of the Democratic Party to run away from Twitter and to run away from TikTok, I think was and maybe is the reason why we are in a second Trump term. Do I have basically any agreement with anything that Elon Musk says or stands for in this current day and age? No. But the only people that ran away from Twitter during that time period were those on the left. What you were then left with were, conservatives and or Republicans who didn't mind what Musk was doing with the platform. And then run-of-the-mill normal voters who weren't going to be fleeing from the platform at all. So you seeded this 100 million person audience to your opponent. And then people are confused when you're losing the narrative game. And it's like, what are you confused about? You're not even in the playing
ballpark.
Field. Yeah. So I thought that was a critically misguided move. And it still is. I think people should come back to the platform. Those who left should come back. It's not going away. It's not going away. And just choosing to, yell into the wind on
act
blue
like it doesn't exist, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and to yell into the wind on blue sky, like, who's that helping?
Yeah. I would say, like, next year we got to come back and do one all on this, right? As you kind of really set into your role. Because I'd love to. This is going to be a hard right turn already in this episode. I don't really care. I wanted to understand, how are you bringing some of your different thinking to your new role, right? Like, I saw the new slogan that will welcome folks to Manhattan, hello, gorgeous, right? As that feels like something someone would have said years ago, and they've been like, no, that's too silly. We're not silly. We're a city. And it's like, no, you got to do something. So how are you starting to kind of bring that Tyler kind of special sauce to your new world of politics to in essence still do the same thing you always do, which is get attention and make people interested in things?
Yeah, I think our big wins so far in the office again lends itself to the exclusivity that exists wherever you are. And so the first example of that for us was back in February. The Trump administration removed the pride flag from Stonewall, the Stonewall Inn, and the Stonewall National Monument. And the borough president, he's the first openly gay borough president in the history of the city, has always been a major leader on issues like that. So he was uniquely positioned to take a major role in the response to that. And we, broke that story, created the rally around it. There was some incredible legal groups who fought in the courts on that front. But kind of being the lead voice on that story lent us to a ton of exposure, whether it was in new media or old media. On the sign, again, that's another exclusive power that the borough president has.
Yeah.
And I give credit to the borough president for the Hello Gorgeous thing. It's a great encapsulation of New York City and Manhattan. But then again, it was like, okay, how do we leverage this in an appropriate time on social media? So we worked with the Department of Transportation. They did a campaign with us on that. And then there was an announcement with Mayor Mamdani on the redesign of the bike lane of the Brooklyn Bridge before the World Cup. And that felt like the perfect moment to naturally introduce this Hello Gorgeous sign. And then I think yesterday is another prime example of taking the exclusivity that exists. We did a proclamation for OG from the Knicks for his game-winning tip-in on Wednesday night.
That was crazy.
Night, yeah.
And
so the borough president's office can make a proclamation to name days for people. So yesterday in Manhattan, it was OG Anunoby Day in Manhattan, and we posted that to social media. And Bleacher Report picked it up, and John Boy Media, and so I have to double check, but I think yesterday was our biggest social day ever. Like, the borough president was referenced over 4,000 times online yesterday. So it's just about tapping into the cultural opportunities that being the office of the borough president presents, because obviously a lot of the more government stuff is hard for people to digest. But I think it's the moments like that where you can bring in these new audiences who will stick with you, hopefully, and then you can inform them on the more kind of wonky aspects of what we're trying to do.
Going back to your LinkedIn, this is for a page for 15,000 followers. If you've written off Facebook, I'd strongly suggest you think otherwise. And there's a screenshot that my editor will pop up that showcases 4.6 million views, which looks like the increase since Tyler's been there compared to the past 3 months is significant. What are your thoughts on Facebook today?
Yeah, I think for a period of time, and maybe rightfully so, Facebook was kind of a pariah in the social world. I think there was a lot of bad taste in people's mouths, obviously, after they made a bunch of companies commit to all of this video programming only to kind of pull the rug out from underneath them afterwards.
Yep.
But I think in the era of the Facebook marketplace, which is obviously used by a ton of people, and also I think the real driver are these kind of Facebook neighborhood pages, whether it's I live in Hell's Kitchen, whether it's the Hell's Kitchen page or my hometown back in Massachusetts has one, whether people are actively posting or not in those groups or even on Facebook at all, they're all watching. Like my hometown is like 5,000 people, and I think the group has 4,000 people in it. So there is some serious saturation there.
Yeah.
And a lot of people just ignore Facebook. Obviously, TikTok and Instagram are kind of where the shiny, 24 to 45-year-old demographic is. And if you're trying to sell things, obviously that's super important. But for a government office like ours, where we're trying to hit everyone from 8 years old to 100 years old, I think Facebook is a perfect place for us to make an impact. And it has been. And Facebook is not the type of place where you are going to see bombastic results every single time. And sometimes it'll take days, if not weeks, for things to catch on. But we've really had a great opportunity on there about keeping people in Manhattan aware of all of the good things that their government are doing, but also just the interesting things that are happening in the borough. Like I brought up the Jimi Hendrix thing that blew up on Facebook, or the Knicks shut down around Madison Square Garden.
Yeah, that was crazy.
Due to Dolan. It's a great place to really keep people informed. And I do think people, because that's a platform where people are on there to be informed, whether it's their neighborhood group or whether it's whatever their neighbor is selling on Facebook Marketplace, they like the information. And they're not necessarily there to be entertained per se.
Yeah, especially, I mean, if it's local, right, regional, I know some guys that are having some big success down here doing some social in that area. We've gone a long time, but we're still going to do a quick lightning round if you'll have some fun with me. Favorite subway line?
Favorite subway line, I would have to say, is the ACE, since I live on the west side.
For social, community management or entertaining content?
I'm going to go with entertaining content.
Yeah, me too. New school social. So this is like For You page kind of social, or old school social. So we're going back like 10 years, a little more about follower count, a little bit more about community.
My feelings have changed a lot. I think 2 years ago, I would say to you, I wanted old school, because I think if you have 1.4 million followers, 1.4 million people should see everything that you post. But in this day and age, because I've started to have a little bit of personal success gamifying the algorithm, I'm going to go with new school social.
Got it. Knicks or Yankees?
Knicks for sure. I could never ever root for the New York Yankees.
Are you a Red Sox fan?
Yeah.
Lion King or the Rockettes?
No, the Rockettes. I've never even seen the Lion King.
My wife and daughter went recently and they raved about it. Top of the Rock or Empire State Building?
Empire State Building.
Best New York pizza?
There's it's called La Vista Pizza. There's a couple of them throughout the city. I have recently discovered them, and I think it's really good. Like in terms of like your neighborhood slice, I think it's fantastic. There's obviously like the top of the crop there, but I think for neighborhood slice, it's really good.
My friend always takes me back to Prince Street Pizza, and
yeah,
I'm like, yeah, it's good. It's good. Evergreen content or news, culturally relevant content?
Culturally relevant. There's a lot of bad evergreen content out there.
Dude, it took us a while, and I kept you a little while longer. But I hope you enjoyed it. We really had a blast today, and just congratulations on all the success. You've done some really, really cool stuff, and I'm just so thankful for you giving us some time to talk through it. And yeah, I'd love to do it again sometime. We'll go more into the politics lane. All right, everybody, that is Tyler. Follow him on LinkedIn. He's a great follow on LinkedIn, especially when he's complaining about backpacks. That's another episode of Radical Content. We'll see you.